So we are on Chaf Hey Amud Aleph 25b, on the top. And we began to set ourselves up for the conversation we're going to have today. And the setup is, just to recap quickly, is the question of whether or not a wife who decides to voluntarily leave the religious context of their relationship. So when they got married, the presumption was that she was going to live a level of modesty that matched their mutual religiosity, head covering, not speaking flirtatiously with other men in public, not sitting in an exposed manner in public, and the like. But she decides on her own that she wants to do that. So she uncovers her hair, she sits in public, chatting, flirting, and that kind of thing. So this, the Gemara tells us elsewhere, is grounds for divorce, considering it's a break of what they expected of each other in marriage from a religious perspective. And likewise, she forfeits her Ketuba. As we explained, considering that the Ketuba is all about financially bounding him to the marriage, that if he should divorce, it should be a financial burden to do so. But in this instance, the Torah, the religious perspective that gives the stamp to that marriage, isn't necessarily encouraging that they stay married. So therefore, the Torah is going to lift that bond, that bond he has to the marriage, the financial bond he has to the marriage, and therefore she forfeits the Ketuba. So the question before us is, does this woman need to be warned before she loses her Ketuba? On the one hand, she voluntarily decided to leave the understood agreement of their marriage, and therefore she forfeits the Ketuba, similar to the one who at least is suspected of infidelity. Or perhaps we warn her to inform her that you should know that this kind of behavior is grounds for divorce and you'll lose your Ketuba, so that perhaps she might change her ways and say, oh, this was a mistake. I want to reinvest in this relationship in the religious context. So this is where the Gemara is. This is where we left off yesterday with this inquiry. And as I explained, the way the Gemara introduces the question, it seems as though there was an individual who posed this inquiry in front of the study hall, and the various different members of the study hall, the students, the scholars, are chiming in with their views. Chiming in. So this and this question is recorded here in Talmud Sotah because the Gemara is going to cite to our Mishnah to suggest that our Mishnah poses a possible solution to this inquiry. And this is where we're standing at the moment. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines from the bottom of the top of the page. Tashma. So Tashma, come and listen. So this is presumably one of the scholars in the study hall that says, come and listen, I have a possible solution. Listen to this text that I'm going to present that might solve the issue. And the text he suggests, how do they translate it there? Tashma, those two words.
Yeah.
No, but before that, what's the translation of? No, the translation of Tashma.
Come in here.
Come in here, yeah. So come and listen. I have this text that might. I have a text that might resolve the issue. And the text he cites to is our Mishnah, the Mishnah in Sotah, which reads, the engaged woman, and the woman who's waiting for her deceased brother-in-law to consummate their relationship. This is the two relationships we've been discussing at length for the last week or so. So our Mishnah said, and this is what spurred the whole discussion, because they are not fully married, they cannot be brought to the temple to drink of the water if they were to become a Sotah, that is to say, if they're intended, warn them about secluding herself with a certain man, and then she went ahead and violated that warning. So she's not taken to the temple to drink the water because she's not fully married, as we explained at length over the last week or so. But likewise, our Mishnah said, she does not get her ketubah. The engaged woman has a ketubah, as the ketubah is written at the moment of engagement. Then in the case of divorce, even though they aren't fully married, but in the case of separation, divorce, or in the case that the groom will die, then she gets a ketubah. Likewise, the shemeres yavam, the one who's waiting for a deceased husband's brother to consummate the marriage, she still has a ketubah from her first marriage, which she still has the right to via the brother-in-law that will marry her, but she still has the right to that ketubah. But now, considering that she's a Sotah, she's suspected of infidelity, even though we have no way of confirming that because there's no witnesses and we don't take her to the temple to drink the water, but she's suspected of infidelity, and that alone is grounds for forfeiting the ketubah. This is what our Mishnah taught us. Now, our Gemara, in commenting on this Mishnah, made the following observation. Drinking, we cannot compel her to drink the water. That is what we cannot do. But warning her, he has the right to warn her. Right? Because there's a few stages to the Sotah law, as we explained over the last 200 classes or so. There's the warning of the husband, there's her breaking that warning, and then there's him taking her to the temple to drink the Sotah water. So our Mishnah says that he cannot take her to the temple to drink the Sotah water. But he can warn her. He does retain the right to warn her. And even though they're not fully married, because they're intended, he retains the right to warn her and say, I see an inappropriate relationship developing between you and X person. I'm asking you to please not seclude yourself with him. I'm jealous, I'm suspicious of that relationship. That, it seems from our Mishnah, he does retain the right to do that kind of warning. This is what our Gemara commented right at the beginning, right after the Mishnah, right? Remember this? Yeah. So now comes the Gemara and says,
we said that maybe it was a legislative policy.
Yeah, to defend, to
protect the husband.
Protect the husband, yeah.
And to deter her from
That's right.
Danger of losing her.
That's right. There's a financial incentive for her not to flirt or not to be suspicious of another. That's right. So even though we don't know, that's right. That's right. Even though we don't know what happened behind closed doors, but this is a deterrent from her, a strong deterrent, so that she does not behave promiscuously, because she might lose her ketubah if she's suspicious of it. She's suspected of infidelity. Now the Gemara says as follows: Lamai, and here is where the proof comes to resolve the issue of whether a woman has to be warned before she loses her ketubah if she left the faith, if she left the religious context of their marriage, which is our previous inquiry. This is how the Gemara tries to resolve by saying, Lamai, to what end do we grant this intended, the engaged one or the deceased or the brother-in-law? To what end do we give him the right to warn her? Lav, is it not? Lav sidak subasa. In order to make her, as we just explained, so that she has so that it dissuades her from behaving suspiciously because she'll lose her ketubah. So what does that teach us? That she cannot lose her ketubah unless there was a warning. Is that not the point? Why are we telling him? Right. Why are we telling him? We tell him that he cannot take her to drink the water in the temple because they're not fully married. But you may warn her. Warn her to what end? Why are you warning her? It's not the point. You warn her so that if she violates the warning, and behaves suspiciously anyway, she'll lose her ketubah. This then would mean that a woman cannot lose her ketubah unless she was warned before. And then for this woman who's behaving non-religiously, she's decided to take off her head covering and she decided to behave flirtatiously in public and so on and so forth, which the Mishnah tells us elsewhere that she loses the right to ketubah. That would mean, following the logic we just deduced from our Mishnah, it would mean that it requires warning before she loses her ketubah.
It would make sense since the gravity of losing the ketubah is so great. There has to be a counterbalance to that.
That's right.
In order
So the logic we understand. The logic we understand. The question is if we have a proof from our Mishnah. And the Gemara is suggesting at this moment we do have a proof from our Mishnah. From the very fact that the engaged one is told that he's supposed to warn her, and then the Gemara concludes that she loses her Ketuba, then it would seem that the reason why he's been given the right to warn her is so that she will lose her Ketuba. If that's the case, we can deduce that the Mishnah is of the view that a woman cannot lose her Ketuba unless she was warned. This is what the Gemara stands at the moment.
That's the inference that's being drawn.
It's the inference that's being drawn, exactly correct.
From that.
That's right.
Dialogue.
That's correct. This is the inference that's being deduced from the fact that he's allowed to warn and she loses her Ketuba. And we're connecting it to the warning is for the Ketuba. Inferring, therefore, that she cannot lose her Ketuba unless there's a warning. Says the Gemara, no. Amar Abaye says, no. There could be another reason why we're giving him this right to warn her. Or let's rephrase that. There could be another reason or another halachic outcome to his warning. And it isn't necessarily bound to the fact that she's going to lose a ketubah. It's quite possible she'll lose a ketubah even without a warning. But the warning has other halachic implications. Namely, Rabbi says, no, we don't necessarily need to conclude that the warning is for the purposes of her losing a ketubah. And without that warning, she cannot lose a ketubah. Not necessarily the case. There could be another halachic ramification to his warning. Namely, la'oisla alav, to make her forbidden to him. The law is, if there is infidelity where a woman behaves unfaithfully, so by law, he is now forbidden to be with her. You have to divorce. Now, when it comes to a suspicious relationship, there's no proof that there was infidelity, but there's strong grounds for suspicion, namely the Sotah, where there's two witnesses to tell us, there's witnesses to tell us that she was locked behind closed doors with such and such a person for X amount of time, so there's grounds for suspicion. In that case, he, the husband, is still permitted to be with her when she emerges from that room, considering we don't know what happened. But if he warned her before and said, don't do that, and then she behaves suspiciously, then we treat that as infidelity so far as the law goes, that he cannot be with her. Therefore, Abaye says, the fact that we are giving halachic value to his warning is not indication that the warning is there in order to make her lose a ketubah. It's quite possible, if she behaves suspiciously, even without warning, she loses her ketubah. As for the warning, what does the warning accomplish? That our Mishnah implied that he has the right to warn. What the warning accomplishes is that they no longer can be together after she breaks that warning. Following? As we inferred from the fact that the Mishnah allows a warning, we have to find what is the halachic relevance of that warning. So we inferred it must be that the halachic relevance of the warning is so that she loses a ketubah, implying that without the warning, she cannot lose a ketubah. But now we're saying there's another halachic necessity for the warning. Nothing to do with the ketubah. The halachic necessity for the warning is so that if suspicion is follows warning, then he is forbidden to be with her again. But if suspicion is without warning, then he can continue to be with her. As for the ketubah, as soon as there's suspicion, she loses the ketubah, whether there's warning or not. In other words, as long as we can find another halachic validity to her warning, then the Mishnah is settled. Why does the Mishnah allow her to warn? Why does the Mishnah tell us that the husband retains the right to warning? Because that warning has other halachic application, nothing to do with the ketubah. Clear?
I think there's trouble following that. What I'm thinking is, if the court provided, if he warns her prior to her seclusion, in his case, with his argument, he's saying that that's grounds for her divorce. Right?
No, it's more than that. Let's back up a second. Let's put the logic aside for a second and talk about the inference from the Mishnah. Never mind the logic. The logic we can deal with afterwards. The logic to all sides of it. Let's first deal with analysis of the text in the Mishnah before we get to what's the reasoning for it. Analysis of the text of the Mishnah. The Mishnah implied that he should warn her. That's all. Well, let's back up even more. All the Mishnah said is she doesn't drink the Ketuba, she doesn't drink the water, but she loses her Ketuba.
Yeah.
That's all the Mishnah said. Now, from the fact that the Mishnah said she doesn't drink the water, means he does warn her. He does warn her. Now, if he's warning her, the question is, so this now is the Mishnah's clear implication that he warns her, and there's halachic value to that warning. Now the question is, what's the halachic value of that warning? We suggested the halachic value of that warning is so that she loses a ketubah. And that would imply that you cannot lose a ketubah unless you're warned. That's only because we've decided to attach the warning to the losing ketubah. What if I attach the warning to some other halachic value? Then the ketubah is free. She loses the ketubah either way. Nothing to do with the warning. We attached the warning to the ketubah, and we gave it logic. That why would you lose a ketubah unless warning? But that's logic we're imposing. Right? Look at the text itself. The text itself, all it said is he can warn her and she loses a ketubah. Are those two things connected? The text didn't say that. We did that. So if we can attach the warning to something else, then the ketubah is free to be lost irrespective of the warning. Following? So now Rabbi is suggesting that the warning is not there to make her lose a ketubah. Losing her ketubah is independent. She'll lose the ketubah anyway because she behaved inappropriately. As for what the value of the warning is another effect, halachically speaking, that after she is suspected, because it was that suspicion was followed from warning, he is no longer allowed to be with her. That's it. And therefore that's divorce.
So in the first case, she loses her ketubah, he can still be with her?
No. No. He can't be with her anyway. It's a divorce. But the question is, what's the point of the warning? All these laws are there. The question is, what's the warning attached to? And when we know what the warning is attached to, then we can derive a law with respect to the woman who decides to behave non-religiously, who takes off her hair, takes off her head cover. Right? Because if we can prove from our Mishnah that the warning is attached to her losing ketubah, then that would become a universal rule. You cannot lose ketubah without warning. But now we're saying it's not the case necessarily. The warning is not directly attached to losing ketubah in our Mishnah. It could be attached to another law, which is that he's no longer allowed to be with her. Okay? So the warning creates a different halachic value, and that after warning, if there's suspicion, they cannot be together, this husband and wife, and therefore they'd have to divorce. Not only they have to divorce, they can't remarry after either, right? Because he's not allowed to live with her. He's not allowed to be intimate with her. Yeah. So now, clear? Now the Gemara is giving another suggestion. Here's another suggestion as to what the value. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No worries.
So in this case, you warned her prior to her seclusion.
Yeah.
You don't attach it to the ketubah.
Yep.
In this case, in Rabbi's case, it's grounds for they can't be together.
Because he warned her.
Because he warned her.
Now, if he didn't warn her, and she behaved suspiciously, what would happen? If you lose your ketubah anyway.
They could be together.
Yeah, they could be together in theory if they want to. He could divorce her and remarry her in a year from now. Because he never warned her, and therefore they're not forbidden to be with each other. But because of her behavior, if they go through divorce, she lost her ketubah, even though she wasn't warned. Okay? Okay. Yeah. Clear? We're just finding other reasons, other halachic values to the warning. And as long as halachic value is not related to losing ketubah, then we don't know anything about whether or not losing ketubah requires a warning before, because we're attaching the warning to a different issue.
In his case, Rabbi's case, does she lose her ketubah also?
Yeah.
Because it's grounds for divorce.
Yeah. But it wasn't because of the warning.
No.
It was because she behaved unsuspiciously. The warning is not what created her losing her ketubah. The suspicious behavior did that, which means even without the warning, the suspicious behavior would do that. The warning created another issue, which is he's not allowed to be with her anymore.
Wait, if she secluded herself
Yeah.
without a warning,
Yeah.
in Rabbi's version, he's still allowed to be with her.
Yeah,
So it was the warning that in fact created, it didn't
But-
create the losing of the Ketuba,
Exactly.
It created what he calls grounds for the.
making her forbidden to him.
It's now a divorce.
And he can no longer remarry
He
her.
can't be with her.
He cannot be with her. His intimacy with her is forbidden.
And she automatically loses the Ketuba.
But nothing to do with that.
By virtue of being grounds for divorce.
By virtue of her promiscuous behavior, not by virtue of the warning. That's it. And therefore, in the case of the woman who there's no suspicion of specific infidelity, but she uncovered her hair, she's behaving flirtatiously, which is grounds for divorce, she loses her ketubah without warning, because we have no indication from our Mishnah that warning equals losing ketubah. Losing ketubah is irrespective. You behave inappropriately, you use your ketubah. Done. Whether there's a warning or not. The warning is only specific to this case because he warned her. Now she behaved suspiciously. Now they can no longer be intimate with each other. Yeah? Okay.
Because in that case where she was acting with this religiosity and then now she's openly doing whatever.
She's openly violating religion.
It's not behind closed doors, it's open to the public.
Yeah.
That's why there's no reason.
There's no suspicion for infidelity.
I'm
I'm saying, so now we're applying logic, which we can do.
Yeah.
But the key here is whether the Mishnah substantiates one version or the other. There's logic to all ways of thinking about it. The question is which way the Mishnah feels about it. Meaning the logic for every single version we have. The question is, which one of those is the Mishnah picking up? And can we infer from the Mishnah which way it goes? Right?
Very narrow way of
Right. In other words, because we want to know what the halacha is, not what the logic is. Right?
Yeah, no.
Once we know what the halacha is, then we can apply logic to the halacha. And maybe the halacha has a logic, certainly. But it's the halacha we're looking for here. Right? Okay. So now the Mishnah Gemara suggests, Papa says, here's another value that the warning does for us that's unrelated to her losing ketubah. So it says like this. Lashkoisa kishihinasua. The reason why there's value to the warning that he gives her while they're engaged is not because this will create a situation where she'll lose her ketubah. Losing the ketubah, she'll lose anyway because she behaved unfaithfully. She behaved suspiciously. The reason why we require the warning is so that as follows. In this scenario, let's do the literal translation. So that he can make her drink the water after they're married. So to explain, think this following scenario. They're engaged. He warns her, don't hang out, don't seclude yourself with ex-fellow. Let's say it's a valid warning, right? He sees a relationship that's somewhat questionable and says, please don't seclude yourself with this guy. Fine. She doesn't. They go through with the marriage. They go through with the chuppah. After the chuppah, she secludes herself with that guy. So the warning was before marriage, during engagement. And her suspicious behavior was after marriage. So says Rav Papa, and we're going to see this from Mishnah. He's going to bring a Mishnah text to back that up. Anyone press 6, please. Yeah. Says Rav Papa that his warning during engagement is valuable because in a case where she is going to break that, she's going to violate that warning, but not while they're engaged. She'll violate that warning after marriage. So now they're a full husband and wife at the moment of her suspicion. He can take her to the temple to drink the water, even though the warning did not come while they were fully married. Clear? And there's the value of the warning. So the warning is not there to make her lose her ketubah should she behave unfaithfully, unsuspiciously. The behavior itself makes her lose the ketubah. As for what is the value of the warning during engagement, the value of the warning during engagement is that this warning will apply to her if she misbehaves after marriage, when they are a full husband and wife, And if they're full husband and wife, he can take her to the temple to drink the water, even though the warning wasn't done at the time of when they were full husband and wife. The warning was earlier while they were engaged.
He's giving another reason why the warning
Is valuable during
not
engagement.
necessarily to the
Precisely.
Another way of it. Now, in this case, it's even stronger because now you can take it to the temple to drink.
That's correct.
That's
correct. In other words, when the verse, that's right. When the verse says that in order to qualify as a Sotah, you have to be fully married, Papa is going to cite to a text which tells us that this qualification that they must be fully married is only with respect to the moment of suspicion. As for the warning, that could be done even earlier, even before they're fully married, while they're tangentially connected, either through engagement or because they're shemeres yavim waiting for the brother-in-law.
This is not really that. Does it have to be with the same paramour, color, same person?
Yes, has to be the guy. It has to be the same guy.
The same guy.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's a different instance.
No. Has to be specific. That's correct. Has to be that specific person. Okay, so let's see. The Tanya, as we learned in the Mishnah text, one cannot warn an engaged woman, lashkaisa, to cause that she shall drink the Sotah water, while she's engaged. Aval but mekanim larusa, we can warn the engaged woman, lashkaisa, so that she will drink kishi nusua if she is suspected after they are married. So all to say that our Mishnah does not help us understand whether or not warning is required for a girl to lose a ketubah. We have no proof from our Mishnah. Because the warning that our Mishnah describes, which is the warning at a time when she cannot be a Sotah, has other value. Number one, it has the value that he is forbidden now to her. Number one, that was a Rabbi suggestion. And number two, as a Papa suggestion is that the warning that he issues during engagement is not such she can lose a ketubah. Losing ketubah, she loses anyway. The value of the warning during engagement is so that when they're married and then she misbehaves, then she's suspicious, now he can take her to the temple and drink based on the warning that he gave her while they were engaged. But as for the ketubah could be lost even without warning, possibly. So we have no proof from our Mishnah one way or the other. It could be our Mishnah connects warning to ketubah, but we have no proof that it connects warning to the ketubah, to the loss of ketubah. And therefore, we'll see tomorrow other suggestions that maybe there are other texts that might resolve our question. Hope that was somewhat clear.
It seems like all the cases that they're giving that warning is not proof of losing the ketubah are cases in which they're going to lose their ketubah anyway under the facts that they present.
That's right, because we're not. That's right.
But then it leaves the two cases that we learned earlier in a quandary over this, because then it's in doubt whether those husbands are protected. In other words, they may have to then pay out on her ketubah.
No.
If they can't rely on.
No.
Right, the Yavam.
They're losing she's losing the ketubah anyway.
She does.
She's losing the ketubah anyway.
They were using.
Hold on a second.
They were using the warning as the basis upon which she loses.
But there is a warning. The case of our Mishnah has a warning. The case of our Mishnah has a warning. It has a warning already, so she's losing the ketubah anyway. The only question is, why is she losing her ketubah? Is it because of the? One second. Let's clear for a second. In the case of a Papa and Abaye, there is a warning, and there is suspicious behavior. The question is, what is the cause of her losing the ketubah? Is it the warning or the suspicious behavior? That's the question. In the case of Abaye, the case of our Mishnah, which is where Abaye and Papa are talking about, there is a warning. He warned her at the moment of during engagement, or he warned her while he was waiting to consummate the marriage. There was a warning, and there was suspicion, and therefore she does lose her ketubah. The question is, why is she losing her ketubah? Is it because of the warning, or is it because of the suspicious behavior? Following?
I'm following. I'm
Now,
just trying to see what the relevance is.
One second. Okay, so let's no. One second. Let's go step by step. Let's make sure you understand each step as we go along. So step number one is there is a warning, there is suspicion, and she does lose her ketubah. Question: ketubah connected to the warning or ketubah connected to the suspicion? Good. Now, if the warning has no other value, then obviously the warning is there for the ketubah. Otherwise, why are we making them warn?
There's no other.
If there's no other if there's no other halachic value to this warning, then obviously the warning is there for the Ketuba. The Mishnah is telling her there's no halachic ramification. If there's no other halachic ramification to his warning, why are we even telling him to warn? So if there is no other halachic ramification to the warning, then it must be for the Ketuba. That's 1 second, right? Good. However, Abaye and Papa each presented other halachic ramifications to the warning. Alternate halachic ramifications to the warning. A, he can no longer live with her anymore thanks to the warning. B, if she violates the warning after marriage, he takes her to the temple.
Yeah, the warning prior to marriage and then after.
That's correct. Which means, therefore, as for her losing the Ketuba, we have no idea whether it's because of the warning or because of the suspicion. Now, therefore, in the case of a woman another case, completely other case, a married couple, they've been living for 10 years, and all of a sudden she takes her sheitel off, takes off her head covering, and starts flirting in the streets. He wants to divorce her. Does he have to warn her to lose her Ketuba or not? We know that she loses her Ketuba, but does she need a warning for that or not? Does she need a warning or not? The Mishnah just said she lost her Ketuba, that her behaving that way is grounds for her to lose the Ketuba. But does that require a warning or not? What's the answer? Who said so? We said we don't know. We don't
know because there's too many
we don't know.
instances where it's not necessarily tied to losing it.
Exactly.
The warning is not necessarily tied.
Exactly.
To
We tried to reduce.
It's unclear.
Exactly. It's unresolved. We tried to do things from our Mishnah because our Mishnah has these 3 steps: warning, suspicion, and losing. But we tried to argue that that's the sequence. You have to have warning, you have to have suspicion, and then you have to lose Ketuba. But then we found out that this warning is not connected. It's possibly not connected to the warning. It has other halachic ramifications.
Right.
And therefore, in a completely other case where we know a woman loses her Ketuba because of suspicion, does she need a warning or not? We don't know yet.
But wouldn't you err on the side of leniency?
Now you're injecting your logic. That's not the halacha. Remember, we don't do that. I want to make something clear. There's every way, whichever way we rule here, there's reasons and logic to all of it. The question is, which one is the halacha? There's reason to say warning is not necessary because she knew all along this was the deal. And there's reason to say warning because give her a chance. We got the logic both ways. Question is, which one is the halacha? Now we're trying to look at a Mishnah and see if we can deduce the halacha. And so far, we don't have any deduction yet.
So in other words, halacha is not initially or
it's in logic, but the question is, which logic? Halacha can go 8 ways, and there's logic to all 8 ways. That doesn't tell you which one of the 8 is the actual halacha, right? In this case, it's 2. There's logic to say yes warning. There's logic to say no warning. But which one's the halacha?
So when these sages are going through these different scenarios, what are they doing? They're not using.
They're looking at the text of the Mishnah. No, they're looking at the text of the Mishnah and using deductive reasoning to understand what is the Mishnah ruling. They're not taking their logic and imposing it on the Mishnah. They're looking at the Mishnah and trying to figure out what's its logic.
It's logic rather than your logic?
Not what's my logic, and then let me go to the Mishnah and make it match. No, there's 9 logics. Let's go to the Mishnah and see which one it is. It's reverse. Remember, Torah's logic is superior to my logic. So my job is not to think of something and then impose it onto the Torah and make sure that fits because I decided it makes sense. It's the reverse. Look at what Torah says and then see if you can figure out a reason for it. So let's look at the Mishnah. And what did the Mishnah say? And then we'll see if we can find rationale for it. But the acceptance is that the Mishnah has it right. And then the question is, can we derive from the Mishnah any sort of halacha? Right? Because there's logic ways. Right?
It's interesting what the Helkat Mahokek says later on with the whole idea that if he, for example, decided to forgive her and she repents afterwards, that she doesn't get the Ketuba, he has to write her a second Ketuba in order for her to be able to get it.
Right.
So he writes her a second Ketuba if she did Tshuva, she loses the Ketuba in any case. But she loses the Ketuba, and if she does Tshuva, then he has to write her a second Ketuba.
That would be a serious ramification, yeah?
Yeah.
Serious practical ramification. Does he have to write a new Ketuba or not?
That would be a nice way of holding in teshuva,
if they wanted to resolve the marriage.
he was, inclined to do so.
If she was,
Or she was.
yeah, both. It's got to be mutual understanding,
Yeah. For sure.
right? Our question is, though, is if this loss of Ketuba was preceded by a warning, does it have to be preceded by a warning or not?
For sure, that's the whole.
And there's logic both ways. And the question is, which one the Mishnah is of the view of? And at the moment, we have no resolution. Because our Mishnah, which talked about warning, suspicion, and then losing Ketuba, we don't know yet if that warning is directly linked to the loss of Ketuba, or is that warning for some other halachic reason? And we give two possible other halachic reasons for that warning, two other halachic ramifications. To make her forbidden to him, option A, or option B, so that if after marriage she violates the warning, she goes to the temple to drink the water. But the loss of the Ketuba could be completely unconnected to the warning.
Yeah.
Or could be it is connected to the warning. We still don't know.
Don't know.
We still don't know where the Mishnah stands on that. So God willing, tomorrow we're going to introduce.
Halakhic rulings very difficult in this case. Then.
Yes, indeed.
Because one is the crux of a.
Yes, indeed. Right. Yeah. You made a contractual agreement between each other about your marriage. You violate the contract, you lose the contract. Why warn? The logic. I'm telling you, the logic can go both ways.
No, I understand. I think that comment.
That is true,
That.
and that would say that would be one side of the coin.
It's hard to resolve issues between husband and wife, especially when there's not clear infidelity. Warning seems to be that linchpin upon which we can hold someone accountable. But now
That's one way of thinking about it.
Saying that
that's one way of thinking.
Really use it, don't know what the warning is for.
That's one way. That's one way of thinking about it.
Yeah, that's my way of thinking about it.
The other way of thinking about it is there's a contractual agreement which included not behaving suspiciously, and you did. You violated the contract.
You're saying you did, but we don't know you did.
You behaved suspiciously.
Yeah, but that's not ground. May not be enough ground. A warning, okay.
So that's the question. Is it understood already before they got married or not? And if it's understood before they got married, no need to warn. I'm just giving you the counter logic.
No, I understand.
And we can go about this all day. The question is which one the Mishnah is at, right? That's our question.
I understand.
Yeah, okay. Fantastic.
I can that in my head.
It's a little bit. Secular law works. Secular law does work very similarly. I guess there's different schools of thought, but if you're like a originalist, right? So you want to look at the original text and ask yourself, what did the people, redactors of that text, think? And that's how you give your ruling. Or you can be an interpretivist and say, well, how would that logic apply to the scenarios today? And today logic changes, and today morals change, so we're going to reapply the law. This is two schools of thought within Jewish jurisprudence. Like what's the role of the judge essentially? To interpret the law as intended, or to reframe it based on the current scenario. So in Torah, it's definitely the latter, it's the former. The law is the law because this is God's law, not the spirit of the law. This is God's law, and that's the way it is. We can understand it. We are so lucky God allowed us to understand a little bit of his law. But it's not the primary. The primary is what's the law. And if we are so lucky, Hashem allowed us to understand a little bit, let's thank him. Right? But the question is, what's the law? Right? Okay.
Your description, sorry, Rabbi, your description is a very good one with regard to originalists and those who interpret the law in a way that they think they would like to apply it with regard to the whole concept of the law as a flowering tree, for example. And you're quite right. For example, there were a good example is the United States Supreme Court and our courts also, on high court, and we often have this debate with judges. Mm-hmm. For example, there are three branches of government in secular law. The branch of government, the executive branch, what it does, it's the executive branch. It decides on policy. Yeah. The legislative branch decides on the law. They basically enact the law. And right. The judiciary interprets the law.
That's right.
And so there are three branches of government that do this. Now, from the point of view of divine law, that's the law, which it is. And then the question is just the question of interpretation.
That's right.
Now, then the whole idea is, with regard to now, those who are originalists say, let's go back to what does this mean in the context of that which it was given at that particular time for that particular purpose, and how does it apply to today? Now, there are all sorts of exemptions that the Eibishter, thank God, put in there also. It's about recognizing we're only human. Oh God, we're only human. Yeah. So he put the exceptions, but we have to be extremely careful to realize what are those exceptions with regard to what they given, and then the exceptions that are there are also given within exceptions with regard to the human duress or the challenge to the person, for example. The example of the person, for example, with the egg.
The law itself will take into consideration all these scenarios.
Exactly. So it's a very interesting, very beautifully. So it's a very interesting debate that goes on, in the Talmud actually, and that's why that interpretation that was given. It's a very interesting interpretation with regard to so if she did tshuva after all that, she loses, of course, her ketubah, but he can write her a second ketubah.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So but how to ensure that we fit the originalist idea into that which we're going to interpret.
That's right. That's right. So yeah, that's right. That's where halachic ingenuity comes in.
Yeah.
Halachic ingenuity is often mistaken to mean that understanding that halacha came from historical context, and because the historical context is different, now the halacha changes. That's not halachic ingenuity. That's halacha disregardance. Halachic ingenuity is to learn how to understand how to find in the law the application that's relevant to the person today. That's halachic ingenuity, but never compromising the original text of the halacha. As you do that, becoming halachic ingenuity, your halachic discardance, right? It's very subtle, but it's a very important.
That's why it's often said that it's not a word more, not a word less, to ensure that we're really following the word as it is, but within the context of the word, there are possibilities, but only based on the exemptions that are given that give the possibility of that idea of how to paskin.
That's right.
So that's why you have those
13 principles, yeah, and so on.
Yeah, exactly. The 13 principles, very well put, Yehoshua. And that's a remarkable way of doing. And for example, the last one that we say just before the Rabbunim Kaddish is absolutely wonderful. If two phrases, for example, contradict each other, how to reconcile them or harmonize them with a third aspect. So the third concept, for example, in this one is, so you write her another ketubah if she did tshuva, but still that first ketubah will not apply.
Yeah. Wonderful.
It was really thank you so much. It's good to hear you both. It's absolutely wonderful, and God bless you. It's a fantastic way to really to be able to discern, to be able to extrapolate in the most wonderful way. Really appreciate it. So tomorrow we'll continue with God's help.
Good day.
Good
day.
Yeshua, all the very best. You should go from strength to strength. All the very best to you, Rabbi. Yes, you should go from. Thank you very much.